Hi, I'm Tom Travat, and this is Photography Adjacent, a podcast about photography and everything else. Each week on our show, we speak to artists, activists, writers, and the occasional photographer to learn about life through their lens. Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. Today, I talk to Ami Robertson, otherwise known as The Wolf and the Wild Thing. They are a wedding and branding photographer based in Folkestone. Today we talk about how to use photography in your activism and building a community. And we also talk about Amy's newfound love for somatic practice and somatic therapy. So stick around and listen to the podcast. Ami Robertson, welcome to the podcast. Very nice to have you on. Thank you very much for joining us just after New Year. Before we begin, people might know you was your online presence, Wolf and the Wild Thing, but they might have known you before as The Woman and the Wolf. That's correct, right? Yeah. So let's begin by talking a little bit about you, your background, how you got into first photography, wedding photography, portraiture, and then more into kind of what's happening now. So give us a little bit of an overview.
Overview. I'm not very good at summarizing, but hello, Tom. Thanks for having me. I have been a photographer for, this will be my 14th year. So I started in 2010. My first kind of interactions with photography, I guess, was when I was doing ski seasons. And I really enjoyed photographing landscapes, but also extreme sports. Not very well. I was genuinely pretty bad photographer in the beginning. And I just really enjoyed it. And then when I stopped doing ski seasons, I moved to London with, I don't know, very loose ambitions to be a photographer, but not really knowing how I was going to kind of get into it. And I was actually an au pair and worked in bars and things like that for the first couple of years that I was in the city. I would probably say that it wasn't until I started to have some form of mentorship or engage with the photography community that I really started to improve and also learn how to run a business and how to do marketing, because I was pretty terrible at all of those things. But I also feel like back then everything was a lot harder because you didn't have things like Squarespace or WordPress, so you had to like code a website to build it. There wasn't any kind of the learning tools that you have on YouTube. The cameras were also a lot more challenging to use, so it was actually a longer progression to become quite good at what you were doing. But yeah, I went full-time in 2015, so coming up to 10 years full-time. And most of my work has been within weddings. And I then kind of started to go into brand photography because that started to become quite big over here. The Americans kind of coined it first, but obviously with everyone becoming some sort of a brand online, more and more people wanted content, and so like professional kind of lifestyle imagery really started to have its boom. And I launched The Woman and the Wolf in 2017. And yeah, built that and my wedding photography like up to 6 figures post-pandemic. Started to do more education, mentoring myself, and build more of an audience. And then in the last 12 months, I've basically completely deconstructed my business and my life, because all of that success made me really miserable and lonely and burnt out. And I use the word success because that's like culturally that's success, right? Getting a business to 6 figures and looking like you know everything, and having people want you to speak and or interview you or things like that. So but like inside I really wasn't very happy at all, and I'd just been diagnosed with autism as well in 2022, so I think that also was kind of a catalyst for going, this is not what I want and it's not the right fit for me. I also realized this, well, in 2023, because we're now in 2024, that I was non-binary. And so having a gendered business suddenly really didn't fit at all. So yeah, 2023 was very much a deconstruction. And I'm currently retraining as a trauma-informed somatic counsellor. So yeah, I'm very multi-passionate. I will still be a photographer, but I also want to be a therapist. And yeah, and that's not even touching on Snap, which is my other business as well. So it's quite difficult to summarize, I think.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think we started chatting maybe kind of sort of spring, early summer of 2023. So I've sort of seen the deconstruction and the sort of beginnings of the reconstruction, I suppose. But I didn't know you before then. So it's obviously, and I think it's very possible that I might have heard you being interviewed on a podcast from about a year ago, which was probably just as you were hitting that kind of six-figure, like you say, the markers of success.
Yeah.
You were just starting to get to that kind of place where it's like, right, I'm being successful. That my brand is where I want it to be. And then you kind of just, it's almost like you just went, no, you had this massive shift. And I kind of met you at the tail end of those kinds of sets of realizations, I suppose. And we've been chatting and hanging out a little bit since then. What's kind of, could you say, instigated that shift? I mean, I know you mentioned autism, your realization about being non-binary, but those seem to have come possibly in the midst of the shift, do you think, rather than at the beginning? Is there something that triggered it? The burnout, or
I think probably the burnout. I have always I mean, we need longer than 45 minutes, but I am a survivor of abuse and complex trauma. I have a very complicated history, and I'd probably say it started in 2018 when I left my ex-partner and was homeless for a year. And that was like a kind of I'm going to keep repeating these patterns unless I choose to work out why I'm doing them. And I was a very different human then. And obviously kind of starting the therapeutic journey. And then working out that I was autistic. It's just kind of over the last 5 years, well, nearly 6 years now, kind of this process of trying to stand on my own 2 feet. I think a lot of my financial success, being six figures, and the success of my business was actually coming from a trauma wound for survival. So that kind of constantly saying yes to absolutely everything, kind of wanting to validate myself, to not ever want to be in the position again where I have to be homeless. Like a lot of it was from fear. And then like this last 12 months has been like there is so much more to life and me than this, and I really want to get to know who that person is, as well as kind of continuing on that journey of like of healing, 35 plus years of quite big complex challenges. So yeah, I can't say it's one specific thing, just I was going to kill myself with the exhaustion and the burnout and make myself very poorly if I didn't make some sort of a change.
Yeah, of course. And you've made some quite radical changes. You also moved, so you are now by the sea, in a beautiful little town. Tell us more about Folkestone.
I love Folkestone. Came here completely by accident. It was 2022. I was kind of wanting to leave London, early 2022, and I was actually going to move to like the Sheffield or Manchester kind of Peak District area because I have friends up there. But I couldn't find anywhere where my horse could go that was suitable for like the lifestyle that she's enjoyed for many years. And I kind of put it on a back burner, and then someone mentioned Folkestone. And my first thought was I could not afford the Southeast on my own. And then when I looked at rental prices here, I was like quite shocked. They're not as cheap as what they were in 2022, but they're still really reasonable. And it had a really fast connection to London. But I just didn't realise, I think when I moved here, it was to kind of get out of London, to be able to have my own space, to not have to house share anymore, to be by the sea, and to also be closer to my horse. And I haven't anticipated the experience that I've had here of like community. The creative community here is huge. The sea swimming community is huge. But there is just, everyone here seems to be in like this mindset of like just looking after each other. It's, yeah, I've had an absolutely amazing 12 months getting to know the people who live here, and the LGBTQ community as well. So yeah, it's really strange for me because I spent my entire life moving like from different countries. At one point I wasn't staying somewhere more than 6 months. I wasn't making any form of like meaningful connections or relationships. So to be somewhere where I like can see myself growing old and really settling is really nice. So yeah, Folkestone has been like probably one of the best choices I made in the last couple of years.
Amazing. One of the things I noticed from your Instagram, I mean, obviously you've got lots of really beautiful work there, but peppered amongst that beautiful work is like posts about yourself and about the kind of connections that you want to make. Like maybe they're text posts, they're kind of carousels. And increasingly now you use Instagram stories to talk to the people that are following you, and you really use this as an opportunity to connect with people. And I think that we often, especially within photography, the photography world, we talk about the importance of community and we talk about the importance of building connections and so forth. But you really seem to have taken that very seriously. And it's not just in a sense that you're trying to show good work. You're obviously showing, the wedding work that you do and the branding work that you do, but also importantly, I think that you're actually taking the idea of community really seriously. Now, that's obviously important to you personally, but it seems also important to you with the other business that you run that you mentioned very briefly, which is Snap. So do you want to give us a little bit of a rundown of what Snap is all about?
So Snap was, I still don't know whether it was a good decision or a bad decision, but it was a decision and it was right at the time. I bought the company in 2021, and it was already kind of established as a conference for wedding photographers. I bought it from its previous owner, Laura Babb, because she no longer wanted to run it, but obviously kind of wanted to kind of continue that on. And my friend Rosie also decided to come into it as well. So she's my business partner. And we've had a really big journey with it. We've had to deconstruct that as well, because there's this whole thing of taking over someone else's brand, right? Which is complex, because you kind of want to continue their business model and then you work out that that's not right for you. So you kind of start changing things. And also, yeah, the community aspect. I feel like the photography industry, and our long-term plan for Snap is to take it out of the photography industry and expand it into the creative community as like a whole. Because as we've kind of grown with it over the last kind of 2 to 3 years, and Rosie's not a photographer, she's a musician as well. We have found that the photography industry has been too small. Like it has felt too small and too restrictive over what we want to bring to people and how we want to connect people. And yeah, the community side, we had our first big conference. I keep saying this year, but it's not now. In about a week, I will stop saying this year.
Yeah.
But last year we had our first big conference in the Peak District, and it was the first time I've ever witnessed on a big scale authentic connection and safety, like a container for people to be able to really be authentic and be themselves and know that they're safe when they're held in that space. And I just feel like we need more and more communities, like genuine communities, not communities where like the motivation is to make like as much money as possible, like communities outside of capitalism. And as well with Snap, we really aim to give a platform to people to really diverse voices, people from lots of different backgrounds, and who have so much value to give just from their stories, as well as obviously helping people to kind of build businesses and feel less alone. Because I think when you work for yourself and you run a small business, it's really lonely and it's really hard. So kind of having a genuine community around you, I think, is just really powerful and really important. And yeah, we also have activism at the heart of what we do as well. Like as artists, as creatives, and as small businesses, we are political, whether we are choosing to be or not. And I think there's just so much power there when you build genuine community, not like the types. I've been in a lot of different spaces over the years, and there's always this pedestal culture where the people who run it are like, everyone wants to be their friend. It's like a popularity contest. There's like a clickiness to it. And instead of the community being able to be safe, the culture is defended at all costs. And I think that's really dangerous. So that's also something that we really focus on with Snap, is creating safe learning environments for everyone, not just the kind of core clickiness, I guess. I can't really find the right word for it.
I've not been to Snap, but I've seen you guys doing your thing from a distance, and I think that in a way, what you've done over the last year, maybe 2 years, is really bring in line, what your interests are and what your commitments are, your political commitments, your social commitments, and the business of running Snap. And I've seen that more and more, that the voice that Snap is speaking in is much more aligned to the things that you've been doing, which I think is, an achievement that we could all be, sort of striving towards, is having that kind of alignment between our own voice and the businesses that we run. It's easier if you're just a one person band, right? In a sense that, you can do that for yourself, but doing that for a company that you've literally taken from somebody else and tried to reinvent, that's also got somebody else and lots of other stakeholders involved, because everybody who speaks at the conference, who goes to the conference, they will have a kind of idea of what Snap is. Bringing that into alignment with the voice that you want to speak in is actually fantastic. And I think that that's actually a really good, you spoke very briefly about kind of marketing. In a sense, it's kind of a bit like marketing, right? It's a kind of very effective way of marketing what you do, precisely because that actually filters out the types of people that you might not want to come to that space, because, like you say, you talk about safety and not having a kind of, you don't want to have a strong, let's say, a kind of a wall around this space, but you do want to promote the types of people that would want to feel safe in those sorts of spaces. So being able to speak in a certain voice is really, that's kind of the mechanism by which you do that. And it does feel very much like that now, especially the kind of ways that you speak online. I think I saved one of your posts this morning, or one of Snap's posts this morning, that's about journaling prompts. And I was like, oh, those are some really good questions to be asking myself. And I think, in a way, what you're trying to do more than anything is teach people how to do what you do. That's what it feels like, outside of just the conference, the kind of way that Snap operates as a space online to kind of engage with. It's like, how do you teach that kind of, I keep using the word alignment, and I'm not sure whether authenticity is the right word, but, something close to something like that. Would you say that that's kind of accurate?
I think that's what I used to do.
Okay.
The kind of, I don't want to teach people what I do. I want to help teach them tools to be able to make their own decisions from their own place. Because I feel it's challenging, right? Like, because with the Wolf and the Wild thing, that can be all me. Like, that can be, and that's in such an interesting place at the moment because I can't earn any money until May 2024 because of the VAT threshold, which I refuse to go over again. So at the minute, that's kind of like this weird space where I'm just kind of filling it, and I don't have a plan for it at the moment. And I'm kind of okay with that, weirdly. With, as you said, with Snap, it's very different. I have a bigger community to think of. I have attendees, I have speakers, I have my business partner, and also the kind of what our brand values are and what we want to kind of put out into the world and what we want to create. And yeah, I kind of just feel like I want to give people tools to like think for themselves rather than be like, oh, everyone's marketing this way, so I will market this way, because that doesn't really work. That's gonna like you're either gonna not be able to be consistent because it's not like aligned with who you are, or you're gonna get the wrong type of clients because you're mimicking what someone else is doing. So yeah, I think I always just want to try and help people find their own voice and take up space in a way that is genuine to them. And I know authenticity is like a big buzzword and it's overused all the time. But yeah, you know, it's been challenging for the last year because I've exited hustle culture when I was fully like marketing hustle culture before. So I think my audience on both sides is a bit like, what's going on? And that's the thing, right? We can be fluid, we can change. Like, there's no fixed destination. I think this is kind of the biggest thing I want to say to people is like, there is no fixed destination. You don't need to be any one thing. You can change your mind at any point. And I think that's kind of what we want to encourage at Snap is this, and it's a very neurodivergent way of being multi-passionate. And I think that's probably our community, but also I view it as a form of activism because I really believe that community, slower living, more sustainable goals, like more connecting with yourself and other people, I really do believe that helps on like the bigger kind of impact of the world, and where we're at the minute. So yeah, I've kind of at the minute just trying to navigate my transitions or transformation over the last 12 months and how I bring that into my brands. It's actually quite hard because you made money the old way. And it's not always the easy path to kind of not be spouting out stuff that isn't helpful.
Absolutely. You mentioned activism, and I want to talk a little bit about that. One of the questions I wanted to ask you about was the kind of using photography for activist purposes. We both work in kind of what could be considered commercial photography settings.
Yeah.
So the relationship between commercial photography and our politics is sometimes fraught. You seem to tread a line very well because by the way that you speak, your tone of voice, it attracts certain types of people to your business. How do you manage that? I mean, like you say, you know, you were one person and now you're becoming a different person. So there are parts of your audience that are probably somewhat confused, if not shocked. But how do you manage that? Like, what's the relationship between photography and activism on a broad sense to you?
So I think you can like go back to a really basic thing with photographers, like we're visual artists, right? I very much feel that photographers have a social responsibility to show diversity through their work, and to dismantle beauty standards. I wholeheartedly believe that, because I wholeheartedly believe that every single person, regardless of what type of body they have, deserves to be seen and to take up space and to have value in the world and to be valued. And I will never forget a wedding photographer I had some very brief mentoring with when he told me that he only booked brides who were under a size 12. And he would never show anyone on his portfolio who was over a size 12. And I just found that absolutely disgusting. Like I really, really, really believe that how we represent people is so important. So I think that just as photography on its own, that is a form of activism. If you can participate in making the world more diverse and beautiful, rather than adhering to kind of capitalist patriarchal beauty standards that and that, even with the woman and the wolf, that was right from the very beginning. I always worked with so many different types of people, and like I always say, there's no such thing as photogenic. There just isn't. But there is, and in a way, this kind of like ties into the type of therapy I'm going to go into. But like, the more embodied you are when you're being photographed, the better. Like, the more of you kind of comes through, the more comfortable you look, the more at ease you look, the more yourself you look. So I'm kind of I've always been promoting that. So in that sense, it has always been activism. I wrote like pre-realizing I was non-binary, obviously writing from quite a gendered perspective. I mean, again, like I can pull this apart for hours, which I won't. But writing, I've always written, and I've always written blog posts. I remember one I wrote, I think it was International Women's Day, like 2020 or 2021. And I wrote about modesty and how that was such a, I don't know if I can swear, but it was a load of poo. It's a complete load of shit. Modesty was like constructed to keep people small and to stop them asking for what they wanted or to claim space. So activism has always been there. And when I left my ex, well, I was really involved with I walked the Southwest Coast Path and raised an awful lot of money for charities that gave free counselling to people who came out of abusive relationships. It has always been in me to want to want to have a better impact, to do better, and that's also the work that I do myself, right? Dismantling the oppressive structures that are inside me. And I want to live in an easier world, like a less harmful world. Like, I don't think that will happen in my lifetime, but I want to move through the world causing as little harm as possible. And that reflects in my businesses, and how I work with people, not perfectly, but also perfect as a capitalist patriarchal structure. So like, none of us are perfect. And just being human, like, I think like the word activism, I feel uncomfortable with, because I think activism is just being human, like, and being in community and caring about how you might be causing harm to other people, or you might not be causing harm, or how you work with other people, how you make other people feel. And I feel like as a business, that's at the core of what we do, right? Because I don't know, I've heard it plenty of times before, going back to photography, where I've had clients who said that they really loved the photos that they had taken on previous shoots with other photographers, but that photographer made them feel like shit. Like, and to achieve those photos, like, how do you make people feel? And I just think it's also intrinsically entwined together, that it's unavoidable. It's absolute chaos. Like, I feel like most of the time, like, there is zero structure to anything that I do, because I'm constantly kind of moving through whatever's kind of happening. And that obviously comes with its challenges as well. But yeah, I just feel, I shared a post the other day which was like, we don't need activists, we just need people to be human and to see other people as human beings and to want them to have the same safety and rights and opportunities that we have. So yeah, I do worry that I'm becoming a bit extreme though. Sometimes it becomes harder and harder to fit in with every kind of shedding, I think, is what I've been going through. But yeah, we'll see where it takes me.
Don't worry. I mean, in my academic world, I'm very much in I guess kind of adjacent spaces to radical activist spaces. So no, there's you can go a lot further before you become extreme, that's for sure.
That's good, because I want to go further. Like I don't.
Good.
What's the point of having a platform and having an audience if you're not having an impact, and you're not using that, if you're not using that to make the change that you want to see in the world? I hate using the word good or bad. Like I really find those words quite, like, because we're all both, right? It's
Sure.
both and yeah, I think, yeah, I'm very much and you obviously follow me, someone who doesn't do the highlight reel. I think that's like another way of kind of working against the system, but also being open and honest and sharing the good and the bad. And yeah, on the most part, I feel that that's helpful for people, as our stories are really powerful.
Absolutely. I think that actually it's the stories that we tell that are going to be the most impactful. And certainly the story of the last year for you has been, and it's actually really fantastic that we've got had a conversation now, the very beginning of a new year, and last year being the kind of big transformation year for you. So you can actually look back at it in some way and kind of piece it together as part of a narrative part of the story, which actually becomes very helpful for people that you're speaking to. Which brings me on to talk about the next stage in your life, which is the somatic healing aspect of your work. And we've spoken a little bit before about how you want to combine photography and the therapy stuff. So tell me more about that.
I have always been interested in this field. I attempted to do psychology for A levels, but I didn't know I was autistic then, but being autistic, I did not function very well in the education system at all. So it's kind of always been there. I've always read books about it. I've always had an interest in why things happen, why we behave certain ways. Like, it's just kind of an endless curiosity, really. And then obviously coming out of my the relationship that I was in 2018, I needed to have therapy quite badly. So I kind of went in. I had two therapists, both were kind of cognitive, so top down. And I could rationalize to people for days about why I behaved the way I behaved, or why I was avoidant, or why I always felt an impulse to run away, or found myself attracted to unavailable, harmful people. Like I could tell you everything. I was very rational, very logical, but I could not cry. I could not express emotions. And it just didn't, it was like I had no access from here below. Like I didn't know, like I could, one of the things I've experienced in the last 12 months is chronic pain. And I before last year, where I wasn't kind of trying to connect with my body as much as possible, I ran a marathon, I did a lot of long distance walking, I could work for days and weeks on end, because I just was ignoring everything that was happening here. And there comes a point where you kind of don't feel anything. You don't feel anything because you've shut it off, you've ignored it so much, and you're in the kind of freeze collapse response of your nervous system. And yeah, I did 3 months work with a somatic coach last spring. And then I walked the West Highland Way. And then I did psychedelic mushrooms. And I'm not suggesting this to anyone, but there was kind of like a period of things that happened, and then I could feel things again, and I could cry, and I could feel emotions in my body. Like I could have a reaction, which is what was not happening before because of the like shutdown. And I just started to explore more and more of the somatics, and like the work of Gabor Mate really opened me up to this idea that our bodies are this really incredible place of intelligence, and we get cut off from them at a really young age. Like it's where our intuition is. It's our feeling body. It's what tells you when this isn't a good person to be around, or this is not the right situation, or this is not the right person to work with, or to tune into how other people are feeling, but at the same time not be telling yourself the story that their withdrawal or disconnect is because you've done something wrong. So it's kind of like that returning to self. And we store trauma in our bodies as well. It's not in our head. People with PTSD, complex childhood trauma and things like that, they yeah. So it kind of just started on this very big journey, and committed to a lot of yoga, which has helped massively. Sea swimming, being in nature as much as possible. And I had already felt like my photography career was coming to an end, and it was making me miserable because I didn't know what else I could do. Like I didn't want to go to university for 6 years. And I also didn't want to do psychology either because I didn't want to be a clinician. Like I wanted to work with people in a more healing way. And so I guess healer is probably the right word. And I think it was like middle of the summer. Someone introduced me to the International School of Holistic Healing. And they had a year-long, it's 18 months because of the supervised work that you have to do, fully accredited course to become a trauma-informed somatic counsellor. And it was just like instant, yes, this is exactly what I meant to be doing. And I'm 2 months in, and it's exhausting, and really confronting, because obviously we're like covering these big topics like dysfunctional families and adverse childhood experiences and polyvagal theory. There's all these like things, and it's all this new information, but I'm also seeing myself and my own patterns within what I'm learning, and that it is quite, the last couple of months have been very confronting with this kind of taking on of new information, but I'm just really excited about this journey and also how it will play out for me as a photographer, because I feel like photography is always a kind of form of therapy in a way, because you're dealing with people who feel quite vulnerable, and you're hoping to give them some confidence and feel better about themselves. So I think having these skills around embodiment and somatics will really help actually make me a better photographer as well. And this has made me like my photography again, I think, which is quite nice. So yeah, fantastic. I could talk about it for hours. It's fascinating. It's just, yeah, but human beings are amazing. But we have, yeah, it's going to be a good fun journey.
Absolutely. I mean, in many ways, photography is that thing where it's this kind of combination of both the body and the mind, right? It's that kind of, you are very much involved with your body when you're on a shoot. You're moving, you're sensing, you're feeling in a way that is not cognitive. It's, once you kind of got over the where do I put the lights or where do I position the person kind of set of, like, not rules but sort of ways of thinking about it, it becomes very much a kind of a bodily felt thing, doesn't it? But then the other side of the business, running the business, is very much like you're on your computer, you're editing, you're emailing, you're updating your website. So it's very much like you're kind of, you're suddenly back in the brain space of things. But I actually think that a lot of people recognize very much what you've just said about, the needs to connect to your body, but without maybe realizing it. Everyone goes to the gym, everyone wants to go on a nice walk in nature, everyone goes, oh, I can relax, I can go for a swim, and actually using their body is a kind of form of relaxation. So in a way, it's kind of part of who we are already. It's just maybe the language isn't necessarily available for everyone to say, oh, actually, this is a form of therapy. This is actually a very helpful thing for us. One of the things I love about being in the studio is that actually you're disconnected from your phone, you're disconnected from a screen, you're disconnected a little bit from your brain. You're just in that kind of moment. It's very, what someone might call a mindful state, or a state of presence. And time just kind of flies, and you come to the end of the session like, oh, wow, okay, that was very quick. So those sorts of things are very, I think, fundamental to the work that we do. And it's, I think, I guess what your role is moving into with somatic therapy is actually helping people understand that connection and understand that way that they can bring those sorts of things into their lives, and maybe even into their businesses, perhaps. Is that something that you think you'd bring into maybe a kind of coaching role that you'd take on?
Yeah, definitely. I really for the most part, we heal trauma. Like, everyone has trauma. So like, I just really want to like reiterate that everyone has trauma. And a lot of us, I know that I did, even when I was my most successful. So like, even when everything looks like it's textbook, exactly how it should be, this is what society rewards you for, it was all responding from a space of trauma. And like, the more and actually my friend Nadia wrote a really beautiful piece about this recently, but the more I've healed, the less ambitious I've become. And the less material I've become, the less I'm attached to how much money I have in my bank or how many sales I've made that month. The more present I am, the more I'm actually enjoying my life. And when it comes to business, I think a lot of people are making decisions from whatever trauma wounds they might have, like whether that's to be more validated, whether that's to win more awards, like whatever it is. And they often achieve the things that they want to achieve, and they're still not happy. They're still unsatisfied. They're still low. They still feel like shit. Like, they still hate themselves. And it's because they're not healing the kind of root of that. And people will go through their entire lives completely unconscious of this. And actually, it's maybe the people who have had maybe more like bigger trauma who obviously go on to do this work that kind of are leading the way with it. But I think absolutely you can have my business now. Like, I know how much I did this, and this is a really good question for people to ask themselves. But one of the things I did earlier in the year is I sat down and I put this on the Snap blog, actually. I sat down and I asked myself, what do I love about my everyday? Like, because life isn't all big moments, right? Most of it is our everyday experiences. And I was like, what do I love about that every day? What makes my everyday feel meaningful and like calm? Not even happy. Like, happiness isn't even the goal, just content, calm. And it was all free stuff. It was all sea swimming, or like mostly free. It was all sea swimming, being able to go to yoga, have a coffee with a friend, have time to read, have time to cook a meal and enjoy eating it slowly, like to not be at my desk all the time. And when I really kind of looked into that, I was like, oh, this is where I need to scale back. Everything needs to be scaled back, because actually, when I work out what I need financially, it doesn't need to be this much. Like, and all I'm doing is void filling. I'm buying stuff I don't need. Like, and I've got rid of so much of that stuff. So yeah, I 100% think the kind of the somatic work, getting to know yourself, shedding those like beliefs and Because it is shedding. I wrote about this as well last year. Like transformation isn't like an adding on, it's a peeling back, and getting to like who you are and what you really want. And that's really big and scary, and it's not easy. But so yeah, I feel like going forward, like with coaching and things, like what I want to do is help people taking that kind of trauma-informed somatic work and bringing it into a type of business coaching where I'm actually helping people to understand, first of all, what they really want, because that's a big question, and who they really are. And you do that by kind of healing our stuff, basically. So yeah, I think it's gonna be really interesting to see what I can put together, and it feels like a really new creative process as well.
Absolutely. It reminds me, probably the happiest I've ever been has been times when I've had the least money. You know, if there's one point in my life that I can think back to when I was the happiest, it was kind of 2004 to 2007. I was running a small gallery in Brighton and we were doing it on an absolute fucking shoestring. You know, there was no money in it. It wasn't as though it certainly wasn't a commercial gallery. It was a little space for us to, you know, put on some exhibitions, make some art. And we were doing it with, you know, £150 or something like that for an exhibition. And genuinely, those moments I look back and like, that's when I've been the happiest. You know, I was on job seekers allowance. You know, had this little gallery space. I was working with my friends and we were just having the greatest of times. And I think that we probably always go back, you know, and actually nowadays, the things that are making me happiest are exactly the things where I feel like that's the same spirit that I'm entering into those kinds of processes with. So, you know, with the photography business, it's like, oh, you know, I am actually, I love the process of doing it. And yes, of course, there are financial goals at the end of it, which help you kind of quantify where you are and certainly help you pay the rent. But it's like, oh, how can I kind of, you know, figure this thing out, or like work out the way that that might work better than this thing, or like, you know, what can I do in that particular instance to create those sorts of arrangements and you know, make my work better, or those sorts of things. So it is those things that really make me happiest, I think. So it's lovely to be able to kind of have that kind of realization that, you know, yeah, look, financial goals are kind of part of it maybe, but they're certainly not the kind of driving force behind what we do. And actually, maybe that's going to lead on to the final question, or sort of well, maybe the final question. We'll see where we get to. You mentioned this, and I think this is something that, you know, is a complex and somewhat difficult internal battle for a lot of people, and certainly for me, is that kind of how do we combine our to use the particular words, a kind of anti-capitalist stance within a kind of confines of a capitalist system. So, you know, we run businesses that have got financial goals. How do you combine those or kind of work out that complexity?
Oh God. This is a big question, and one that I have been trying to answer for a little while now. We live in you're right, we live in a capitalist system and we have to survive it. So I kind of like, that's kind of what I've been looking at, is how can I survive the system, but then also how can I break it a little bit as well. And I think that's the kind of key part. I know as we move forward with like Snap, for example, we obviously need to make money. We haven't made any money. We've lost a lot of money. But like, it's a process, and events cost a lot of money. So it's not like you just buy the cameras and then you're kind of a photographer. We have a lot more overheads.
Yes.
But we really believe in what we're doing and where we're going and what we want to do. And plus we enjoy working together. I really enjoy our community. So there's like, yeah, we need to make some money, but also we're really enjoying doing this, and what we're doing is good. But like there's things like accessibility, I think, can also help. So like we are experimenting more this year with like we can't do it for our big conference because we need to break even, but like with our other offerings we're kind of looking at like a pay what you can type accessibility. So like, because so many I think it's probably dying now, but the whole like business culture was like, you know, look at me in my kind of 6-figure or 5-figure launches or whatever, and that's amazing, but like that's not sustainable. Like there's only so many times you can sell that course, and you are just selling that course to make money, or not necessarily. Like it's yeah, the kind of like coaching industry I kind of feel like is just coaching people, teaching people how to be coaches, and that's very
yes, it really is,
right?
Yeah.
Like it's like the like MLM, or like, you know, it's just, yeah, the kind of like affiliate thing as well. It's great if that's for you, but like I want my work to contribute to a better world, and the biggest thing has been the slowing down and looking at sustainability within my businesses for myself, so I don't break, like, and so I have the fluidity to change and evolve. Like, you know, as we talked about earlier, like one of the biggest things has been like the kind of almost sudden U-turn for my audience, and accepting that I'm going to lose a portion of that audience. I'm going to have to rebuild from somewhere. With capitalism is like a gripping, it's like a holding on. It's like, it's very like materialistic. It's very it's like based on you as an individual. It's very individualistic. But I think when you can kind of outside of that, that's where you can like okay, I don't need to earn more than 85,000. Like business does not need to turn over more than that. This is my own personal businesses, not Snap. Snap does need to turn over more purely because of the cost of what we're doing. But I need to turn over 85,000, and that is enough. That is enough for me to do everything that I want to do, because I sat down and worked out exactly what I want, and I stripped away the kind of societal pressures of what that should be, and actually thought about what I wanted. And most of it is, you know, is time. But yeah, 85,000, don't need to go over the back threshold. And it's having that boundary of like, okay, that's £8,000 turnover a month for 10 months of the year, because I don't want to work for 2 months of the year. And it's that slowing down, because people seem to think you need to earn like 6 figures or 7 figures in order to not have to work that much. You don't. You just need to not want the fluff. Like you can have the life you want on less money. And then the beauty of that is, so obviously I'm like 1,500 away from the VAT threshold at the minute until May 2024. So I can't actually really earn any money for the next 5 months. And it's been like that since November. And it's really interesting to see what happens when you're getting a lot of inquiries for stuff and you're like, I can't say yes to this. I have to say no. There is a lot of stuff that comes up. But the beauty of that is the work that I've passed on to other people. I've been able to be like, I can't do this, but my friend can. I can't do this, so I'm going to post it in the Snap group and pass it on to someone else. So then other people are doing well as well. And I think that's how you survive the system, but also start to break it down a little bit, because it's a mindset. It's not, they want you to be thinking that there is not enough and you need to say yes to everything and you need to protect all of your resources rather than sharing resources. And I think that's the kind of switch, and being like, this is what I need, but after that I can share it with everyone else. And like, yeah, I'm sure there's lots of other ways that question can be answered, and I'm sure there's more, but that's kind of the answer that I've kind of come to at the minute.
Yeah, I think that we're all kind of battling with these various contradictions that are inherent in who we are as people, and inherent in the fact that we live in certain parts of the world and, you know, live under certain systems. And it's very difficult to actually, you know, there certainly would be no demand for purity. I think, having everything kind of completely figured out, like you say, the good, the bad, that kind of
Yeah.
division is probably not particularly helpful for us, actually. But it seems to me that you've found a route, or you're designing a route through this, sort of this mess that is really beneficial to you, because it can
Yeah.
help you, live a life that is genuine to who you want to be. And I think that that's actually something that we should all be hopefully able to do, or at least kind of working towards. And in a sense, that's a little act of resistance in a way, on a kind of personal level, isn't it? But hopefully the way that you kind of then can help other people do the same things, that's the kind of activist part of the project. It seems, you can do it for yourself. It's not particularly activist, but it's the process of creating the communities and the sort of mechanisms by sharing those kinds of resources and the learning that you've done, that actually creates those kinds of environments which will help people.
Exactly. And I think just like I think we need to move out of this whole like self-care. Like, so looking after yourself is really important. Your well-being is really important. But like you have to then move into collective and community care. Like the world, that is like what we need to be doing. And
Absolutely.
the more we're like focused on I say unnecessary, like the more we focus on the things that are probably not as important to us. And I think the kind of big question I put to people, and what I ask myself regularly, is how do I want to feel when I'm dying? Like when I'm at the end of my life, like, and I'm looking back. And I think actually reckoning with your mortality on a regular basis is also a very powerful way of getting to the root of what you want. And ultimately everyone wants the same thing. Everyone wants to feel connected. Everyone wants to feel a sense of belonging. Everyone wants to experience and give love. Like, we want enough food and we want a roof over our heads. But the real baseline of things, like, you just need to look at social media. The reason people put out the stuff that they do and the way that they do it, and I do it too, is because they want to connect. And capitalism has put our value in our work and our productivity, when actually we're entitled to all of those things regardless of what that is. So yeah, it's such a big topic, but I think when you really get down to what you want and how you then realize that it's not these superficial things that we've been told to strive for. And that's, I suppose it's basically just what's happened to me in the last 12 months. And I've just gone, oh, great. Okay, we'll start again.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important, right, to remember that actually capitalism is a particular type of system, but you can actually still be participating in what is known as a market without it necessarily being a capitalist one. So it is important to be able to hold on to that you can actually sell a product or a service without it necessarily being sort of completely tainted by capitalism. And I think what's really interesting is that you mentioned self-care, and I've got a lot of problems with the self-care kind of narrative as well. And I always feel that self-care without solidarity is really, like, it's not politics at all. It's just individualism.
Yeah.
A lot of my teaching work is focused on kind of a critique of what looks like leftist work, I guess, which is the kind of self-care, healing, kind of communities that are all about, like, individualistic, make yourself better kind of toxic positivity, all of that kind of stuff. So it's really good to be able to finish with that.
Yeah. And we look after each other. Like, one of the biggest things people have a struggle with, and I was the same, is asking for help.
Sure.
Like asking for help is anti-capitalist. Like accepting that you're a human being and sometimes you need help. And I have witnessed this a lot within my circles. And actually, that's one of the things I love about the Folkestone community is that when someone needs help, everyone is there, even if they don't know them. Like the other day, someone who doesn't have a lot of money at the moment, their laptop's broken, and I think between like 10 people, we managed to like solve it. Like, you know, it's just this. I think that is probably one of the first steps for people, is like being like, rather than pretending that you've got it all together, you know, occasionally and publicly asking for help, and being a bit vulnerable, and then also be willing to help other people. Yeah, I think there's just so many ways. And I like what you said about like participating in certain markets. Like I haven't bought anything from Amazon for a year. I have committed myself to spending my money with small businesses. And I'm very fortunate that we have a lot of choice where I live. But yeah, so I think like that's like little things like that as well, I think are really that you can take part in your own kind of little ethically capitalistic markets, I guess, in a way. So yeah, it's could talk about it for hours and hours.
We will do on another time. So just to wrap up, you're a big reader. You're always posting book recommendations. So give us one. What are you reading at the moment or have read recently that you think people should be reading?
So there's 2 books that I'm reading at the moment that I would really massively recommend. One is Care Work, Disability Justice.
That's great.
Let me get it 1 second. Oh, I can't find it. It's not here. Care Work. I can't remember her name. It's Leah something. But if you look up Care Work, Disability Justice, the book will come up. It's written by Black or people of color, disabled people, queer people, and like the essays in there about building accessible communities and structures that include everyone is probably one of the most vital books that I have read in a really long time. Another one I'm reading at the moment is My Grandmother's Hands, which by Resma Menachem. I hope I pronounced that right. It's about racialized trauma and the pathway to mending our hearts and our bodies, and the way he takes the somatic work and applies it to generational trauma and racialized trauma is just incredibly powerful. And yeah, that's 2 books that I'm reading at the moment. I think I could reel off like 20, but
I'm sure people will just have to follow you on Instagram to get your book recommendations.
I'm putting together my end of year, which is going to have all my book recommendations from the last 12 months. Yeah, reading is powerful. My commitment this year, one of them is to far less time on my phone and more time reading books, because yeah, my phone really irritates me. Yeah, again, that's another thing to navigate.
Absolutely. Amy, it's been an absolute pleasure. Where can people find you?
So you can find me for kind of my portraiture and what will eventually be coaching and therapeutic stuff. The Wolf and the Wild Thing on Instagram. Ami Robertson photographer if you're interested in weddings. And then Snap Photo Fest for kind of Snap and all of that stuff. But they are all kind of cross-pollinated. So if you find one, you'll find the others.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for joining me today, Amy.
Thank you for having me. It's been nice to chat.
Very good.